Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into the dim, damp corridors of a place you definitely wouldn't want to visit in person, a medieval hospital. Imagine it now, the air choked with the stench of unwashed bodies, the sharp bite of rotting straw underfoot, and the distant, ceaseless moans of people who, frankly, probably won't make it till sunrise. You might think you're brave enough to handle this, but trust me, you probably won't survive this one. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not post your location and local time in the comments? I love seeing how far and wide our little sleepy history family stretches across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open the heavy, splintering oak doors. They creak like the groan of someone who knows what's waiting inside, and they should be afraid. Because as you step into the medieval hospital, it hits you like a wet wool blanket in July. The smell, a sour, meaty tang of decay, old blood, and something you can't quite place. Maybe damp feet, or worse. You squint through the smoky gloom. The narrow hall is lined with crude wooden pallets, if you're lucky. Some patients lie directly on the cold stone floor, their bodies curled into themselves like question marks. No one bothers to answer. The walls are stained, dripping with condensation, and coated in layers of filth that no one has time, or frankly, the will to scrub away. And you, well, you've just wandered right into the middle of the 14th century's most terrifying open-plan health facility. In theory, you're here to be healed. In practice, this is more like an overcrowded waiting room for the afterlife. The patients around you aren't separated by illness or even by severity. They're mashed together in one giant heaving stew of disease. People with festering wounds lie side by side with those coughing up their lungs from consumption, and the occasional poor soul battling smallpox shares airspace with the truly unlucky ones, the plague victims. It's a little like those chaotic ER scenes in medical dramas, except instead of overworked doctors with clipboards, you're staring at monks in fraying robes, some wearing what look suspiciously like leather butcher aprons. And there's not a stethoscope in sight, though there are plenty of rusty knives and saws hanging on the walls ready for their next victim. I mean, patient. You shuffle forward, careful not to step in, whatever that is. Sloshing puddles of something suspiciously red mingle with straw, spilled chamber pots, and the occasional rat tail. Yes, they're here too, darting fearlessly between your feet, emboldened by the all-you-can-eat buffet of filth. One particularly bold rat eyes you as if sizing up whether you might become dinner soon enough. You can't help but laugh quietly, but not too loud. After all, the last thing you want is to attract the attention of Brother Gregory over there, sharpening his bone saw like he's prepping for a Sunday roast. And if you think that's bad, brace yourself for the bed situation. Beds. That's a generous word. What you're looking at are flea-ridden straw mats packed so tightly that the dying are practically spooning. Personal space non-existent. Sheets dream on. The lucky ones might get a threadbare blanket, but that's more for show than warmth. And don't even ask about pillow hygiene you'd rather not know. Patients cough into the air, into their hands, into each other's faces. There's no such thing as infection control. Germ theory. That's centuries away. Here, sickness is seen as a punishment from God, or perhaps an imbalance of your humors. Those four mystical fluids, they believe, slosh around your body, determining your fate. You can almost hear modern doctors collectively screaming from the future, and while you stand there, overwhelmed by the stench and chaos, a man clutching his side staggers past, clutching what you hope is a bandage, but might actually be an old dish towel. He collapses right at your feet, his face, pale eyes, rolling back, and no one even blinks. This is daily life in a medieval hospital. There's a certain grim rhythm to it all. People arrive, they suffer, they die. They're eventually dragged off. Sometimes. Other times, they just stay right where they are until the smell forces someone's hand. Historians still argue whether these medieval hospitals were actually designed to heal, or if they served more as charitable warehouses for the hopelessly ill, out of sight, out of mind. Some records suggest a focus on palliative care, offering food and spiritual comfort to ease people into the next life, rather than fighting to preserve this one. But even that comfort is questionable when your priest is more focused on ensuring you confess your sins than making sure your wounds are clean. Priorities, right? Oh, and that cheerful notion of charity. Well, remember, many hospitals were funded by wealthy patrons seeking to buy favor with God. Whether that favor trickled down to actual patients, let's just say the results were inconsistent, and you're still standing in the middle of it all, probably regretting that you didn't just stay home with your imaginary 14th century Netflix. But hey, it gets worse. We haven't even gotten to the surgical wing yet. Spoiler alert, there's no wing. It's just a corner of the same festering room with a few extra saws. And while you're still awake and breathing. Maybe tap that subscribe button before the smell knocks you out first. You shuffle deeper into the labyrinth of misery where the so-called medical experts await. If you were hoping for someone in a crisp white coat, maybe with a reassuring bedside manner and a diploma on the wall, yeah, about that. Instead, you get Brother Matthew, a monk with stained robes and breath that could knock over a war horse, and assisting him, a barber. Yes, a barber, because in the Middle Ages, the guy who trims your beard on Sunday also pulls your teeth and lops off your infected leg on Monday. Jack of all trades, master of none, especially when it comes to medicine. You watch as the barber surgeon prepares his tools. There's no sterilization, no gloves, no soap. He wipes his rusty instruments on what might once have been a rag, but is now so stiff and grimy it could double as medieval body armor. His hands filthy, his apron spattered with stains in every shade of red and brown imaginable. You probably won't survive this. But the medieval staff, oh, they mean well. They've read the classics well, those written by Galen and Hippocrates, who by the 14th century were already ancient history themselves, and their medical advice still gospel, even if it's wrong, like dangerously wrong. They believe disease comes from imbalanced humors, blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Get too much of one, and your body goes haywire. The solution: drain it, bleed it out, poke, prod, purge, or saw it off. Historians still argue whether barber surgeons were truly trusted figures, or if they were the back alley mechanics of the medieval world called upon when no other options remained. But right now, Brother Matthew is calling them the heroes of the hour. He waves you forward, inspecting your leg, which you stubbed earlier on a jagged stone outside. It's a small cut, but in this world, that's an open invitation to infection, gangrene, and a one-way trip to amputation town. You try to back away. Too late. Brother Matthew calls over the barber who eyes your leg like it's a roast chicken. You half expect him to ask if you'd like extra gravy. But no, he's already sharpening his saw. The crowd gathers. Yes, a crowd. Because surgery isn't a private affair here. It's a spectacle. Other patients, staff, and curious visitors lean in close, eager for a distraction from their own miseries. Entertainment options are limited, after all. And you, well, you're the show. There's no anesthesia, not even a sip of wine for courage. They might let you bite down on a stick if they're feeling generous. You feel the first slice more of a tear, really, as the saw bites into your flesh. The pain is instant, blinding, and all-consuming. You want to scream, but your throat closes up, strangled by terror. Modern you is screaming in the back of your mind, demanding someone invent penicillin already. They work fast, mostly because they have to. The quicker the cut, the lower the chance you'll bleed out on the table. Though lower is relative. Many don't survive the procedure itself. Fewer still make it through the inevitable infection that follows. Brother Matthew mumbles a prayer over your writhing body, while the barber continues his face calm, almost bored. This is just another Monday for him. Once the leg is off, they cauterize the stump, yes, with a red-hot iron. The smell of burning flesh fills your nostrils. You wish you could pass out, but your body stubbornly refuses. And when it's done, they toss the saw into a basin of water, used, reused, never cleaned, and move on to the next poor soul. Efficiency over hygiene. Every single time. Historians still debate whether the high mortality rates were from the surgeries themselves or from the brutal post-op conditions patients endured. Either way, survival is a rare trophy. You somehow are still breathing. For now. But don't get too comfortable. You've only just entered the world of medieval medicine's greatest hits. As you're dragged back to your bed, which is really just a communal straw pile, you hear stories from the other patients. One man proudly shows you the leeches Brother Matthew applied to his boils earlier that day. They're still wriggling in a jar by his side, waiting for their next victim. Another patient grins, revealing a mouth full of teeth. Except half of them are missing, yanked out by the barber during an impromptu dental cleaning. No numbing agents, of course, just muscle and willpower. And you realize something in this place. Every procedure is a gamble. Medicine. More like medieval roulette. Spin the wheel. And maybe you'll walk, or hobble away. Or maybe you won't. It's at this point you notice a new patient being brought in. She's pregnant. And you can't help but shudder, because in the medieval hospital, childbirth isn't a blessed event. It's a death sentence waiting to happen. But that horror story, we'll get to that later. For now, you try to sleep. You curl into the straw, ignoring the cold seep of your own blood mixing with the floor's grim cocktail of filth. But sleep doesn't come easy in the horror house. Not when you can hear the screams from the makeshift surgical corner still echoing through the halls. And remember, this is just the beginning. The screaming doesn't stop. You pull the filthy blanket tighter, but it does little to muffle the moan's cries and the rhythmic scrape of the bone saw in the corner. You try to remind yourself that it's just the sound of healing, sort of. Except in this place, Healing often means you're lucky to live long enough to regret it. Your leg, what's left of it, throbs with a searing pain that feels like it's chewing its way up your spine. The stump is wrapped in cloth that was probably used on 3 other patients before you soaked in something that smells like old wine and herbs. Infection, inevitable. And if you think your suffering is special, just look around. In the next cot, or rather pile of straw, is a man with an arrow still lodged in his shoulder. They'll get to him eventually, maybe after the barber takes his lunch break, assuming they can fish out the right size saw. You stare at the tools of the trade. Hooks, pincers, blades that look like they belong in a horror movie. Except for these people, it's Tuesday. No antiseptics, no anesthesia, no mercy. Your neighbor chuckles through cracked lips, seeing your pale face. He's been here a week, calls himself Thomas. He lifts his shirt to reveal a scarred torso riddled with burns and scars from the last round of cauterization. You get used to it. He grins, though you suspect it's more madness than comfort. Or you don't, and you die. Nice pep talk. Historians still debate whether medieval surgeries actually saved more lives than they claimed. Some argue that quick amputations could save a person from gangrene. Others suggest that the survival rates were abysmally low, and the patients who made it through were the exceptions, not the rule. But here's something no one debates. Anesthesia was non-existent. The closest you'd get might be a strong dose of ale or a whiff of some noxious herb that, if anything, just made you throw up while they sawed off your limb. You think about all the things you take for granted in the 21st century, like aspirin, or, morphine. Even a numbing ice pack would feel like a miracle here. But no. All you have is grit luck, and maybe a prayer to whatever saint covers people missing limbs. Probably Saint Agatha, though you're not sure you want to know her story. And the surgeries keep coming. A boy with a festering hand, a woman screaming through childbirth as they cut her open. Yes, open. Caesarean. Sections in the Middle Ages were more likely to be post-mortem than life-saving. A desperate bid to save the child when the mother's fate was already sealed. Sometimes you can't tell if the screams are from the patients or the rats. Both sound eerily similar in this place. Remember how you thought the monks might be your saviors? Well, here's a fun tidbit. Many of these holy men performing your surgeries barely knew what they were doing. They read from old manuscripts passed down from the Romans, who passed them down from the Greeks. Medical knowledge was stuck in an echo chamber of ancient texts No new discoveries, no modern science. If Galen said it, it must be true, even if Galen never saw a plague like this. And yet, these men thought they were doing the Lord's work. Some even believed the pain itself was cleansing. Suffering brought you closer to God. You'd think twice before complaining about a stubbed toe after hearing that logic. You shift in your straw nest, trying to avoid the cold seep of your own wound. But you know it's only a matter of time before it festers. Already you can feel the heat creeping from the stump. Fever, your body's red flag that the medieval bacteria have RSVP'd to the party. But don't worry, they have a cure for that too. More leeches, maybe some bloodletting. After all, clearly, you've got too much blood if you're burning up. You close your eyes, drifting into a restless half-sleep, filled with visions of saws, monks chanting over your twitching body, and the occasional rat scuttling over your chest. When you wake, if you can call it waking, it's to the sound of Brother Matthew announcing it's time for more treatments. Today's special purging, which means, well, it's not glamorous. Buckets are involved. So are violent herbal-induced vomiting and diarrhea. They believe that by cleansing your insides, they can restore the balance of humors and flush out the sickness. Historians still argue whether these practices did more harm than good. Some believe certain purgatives might have helped with mild infections. Others point out that forcing already weak patients to expel what little nourishment they had left was a shortcut to the grave. You don't get a choice in the matter. They tilt back your head, force the bitter brew down your throat, and, well, you know the rest. Let's just say the floor wasn't clean to start with, and now it's a biohazard. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. Okay, it is. But at least you can joke with Thomas about the rat he saw dragging off someone's toe in the night. Probably exaggeration. Probably. And then there's the patient across from you who swears he heard that someone was cured last month. Miracles do happen, right? Or at least rumors of them. Still, you can't help but notice the way the monks glance at you. Now pity in their eyes. They've seen the fever set in. They know the odds. But don't worry, you're still breathing. For now, you might even get to try the next miracle cure they've lined up bleeding. Again. Because if at first you don't succeed, bleed again. And with that grim thought, you try to close your eyes. But the nightmares here don't wait for sleep. Morning breaks. Or at least you think it does. It's hard to tell in here. The narrow slits of the hospital's tiny windows let in just enough gray, sour light to remind you that, yes, you survived the night. Barely. But the day brings no relief. In fact, it brings a new horror, the beds, or what passes for them. You thought you had your own grim little straw pile. Cute. Turns out the hospital has an open-door policy when it comes to space. If a new patient arrives and there's an inch of room on your mat, guess what? You're sharing now. Your new bunkmate. A man with a hacking cough that sounds like he's gargling pebbles. His skin is yellowish, slick with sweat, and he introduces himself by vomiting right next to your face. Lovely. You see, in medieval hospitals, privacy is as much a fantasy as hand sanitizer. Space is scarce. Beds are communal. And if you're lucky enough to score one, you can expect to share it with strangers. Their diseases, their fleas, and their bodily fluids. Who needs personal space when you can have collective suffering? Historians still argue whether this overcrowding was by accident or design. Some records suggest hospitals were meant to house as many as possible, focusing more on providing Christian charity than any actual cure. Others believe it was a logistical failure. Too many sick, too few places to put them. Regardless, the result is the same, a breeding ground for more illness. You try to scoot away from your new roommate, but it's pointless. Beds, straw piles, wooden planks, whatever they can cobble together, are wedged so tightly that limbs dangle off into the aisles. You turn your head and realize you're practically nose to nose with a woman coughing up blood into a rag. She offers you a sad, toothless smile. "First time here," she rasps. You nod, swallowing the bile rising in your throat. Thomas, ever the optimist, grins from his spot a few feet away. Sharing builds character. He jokes, though you suspect it's the fever talking. And if the crowding weren't enough, there's the linens. Or, more accurately, the rags. Hospitals, when they could afford them, might issue a blanket or a sheet. But laundry. Don't make them laugh. Linens were rarely, if ever, washed. They were passed from patient to patient, often soaked with pus sweat. And, well, let's just say everything the human body can excrete. Sometimes, if the linens became too disgusting, they'd simply be tossed into the corner, replaced by slightly less filthy ones. Fun fact, the word hospital comes from the same root as hospitality. Irony, right? Because there's nothing remotely hospitable about these conditions. And yet, this was the best medical care most people could hope for. The sounds around you are a symphony of suffering. Coughs, groans, the slosh of chamber pots being dumped into the already swampy floor. The air is thick, heavy, and you wonder if it's possible to suffocate on sheer misery. And amidst it all, there's the ever-present shadow of contagion. You don't need germ theory to see how fast sickness spreads here. A man might come in with a broken arm and leave with smallpox, or not leave at all. Remember your leg? The stump is starting to ooze something that doesn't look healthy. Not that anyone's checking. The monks are too busy blessing the food, or rather the gruel. Yes, mealtime has arrived. And if you thought the medical care was bad, wait until you try the food. Today's menu is the same as yesterday's and tomorrow's. Thin barley, gruel, a chunk of hard bread you could chip a tooth on, and wine watered down so much it tastes more like murky pond water than anything resembling alcohol. Historians agree on one thing: medieval hospital food was barely food at all. It was more about providing minimal sustenance than nutrition. Patients were often fed the cheapest staples grains, root vegetables, and whatever scraps the hospital could scavenge from donations. But sometimes things got creative. Enter the herbal wine, flavored with whatever herbs the monks believed might have medicinal properties: wormwood sage, mint, and occasionally things like foxglove, which, fun fact, can kill you in large doses. It's a culinary gamble with every sip. You gag as the gruel slithers down your throat. It's cold, lumpy, and leaves an aftertaste like someone boiled old socks in it. Thomas tries to make it interesting by sprinkling some dried herbs on his. He calls it extra flavor. You call it desperation. And the bread, forget it. Even the rats won't touch it unless they're truly starving. You eye the wine, hoping at least for a small buzz to take the edge off your pain. But nope. The monks insist on watering it down, fearing that drunk patients might act improperly. Because heaven forbid anyone cause a scene in this temple of suffering. Still you sip it anyway, if only to wash down the taste of the gruel and your own bitter resentment. Historians still debate whether these culinary horrors were due to ignorance, poverty, or a deliberate attempt to keep patients weak and docile. Some suggest the food was meant to be penitential, a reminder that earthly pleasures were to be denied, especially in places dedicated to piety. Either way, your stomach turns. You long for a slice of modern pizza, or at least a saltine cracker that doesn't double as a dental weapon. And as you sit there, gnawing on despair disguised as bread, a group of monks passes by, sprinkling holy water over the patients. One pauses over you, offering a prayer for your soul. You try to smile, but the effort feels hollow, because you both know the truth. Your odds They're as thin as this soup. You slump back onto your lumpy straw mat, stomach churning from the gruel and herbal wine. But there's no time for rest. The monks are making their rounds again, and this time it's not food they're carrying. It's bowls, knives, and is that a jar of leeches? Of course it is. You groan, but Thomas pats your shoulder sympathetically. Time to rebalance your humors, he says with mock cheer. Like this is all part of the spa package. In the twisted world of medieval medicine, sickness wasn't seen as the result of bacteria or viruses. No, it was a case of your humors, the four mystical fluids inside your body being out of whack. Too much blood, let's bleed you. Too much phlegm, let's purge you. Too much black bile. Good luck. No one really knows what that is. Historians still argue whether the humor theory was entirely superstition, or if, in some twisted way, it occasionally led to treatments that inadvertently helped, like bloodletting, reducing dangerously high blood pressure. Though, spoiler alert, most of the time, it just made things worse. Brother Matthew approaches you with his usual grim enthusiasm. You've got the fever, lad, he says, eyeing your sweaty brow. We need to drain the heat. And by drain, he means exactly that. You glance at the bowl he holds under your arm, already stained crimson from the last poor soul's treatment. Hygiene. Forget it. They might as well be using the same spoon for everyone's soup. The process is as brutal as it is ineffective. Brother Matthew ties a tourniquet around your arm, selects a rust-speckled blade, and opens your vein like he's carving a roast. Blood pours into the bowl, dark and warm, as you fight the dizziness creeping up your spine. Thomas chuckles. They say if you lose enough blood, the demons leave you alone. You're not sure if he's joking. As your head swims, the monks chant prayers over your prone body, as if the words alone can purify the sickness pouring out of you. They believe that by draining your blood, they're restoring the sacred balance within. You, however, feel like they're draining what little life you have left. Once the bowl is half full, or as Brother Matthew says, when your color looks right, they wrap your arm in a strip of cloth that looks suspiciously like it's already soaked in someone else's fluids. You lie back, drained, literally and figuratively. And if the bleeding doesn't work, well, they have other options, like purging. This time, it's administered as a thick, bitter concoction, poured straight down your throat, forcing you to vomit until your insides feel hollow. Some monks swear by it, claiming it clears the evil humors from your belly. Others just seem to enjoy watching people retch. Then there's the ever-popular enema delivered via a pig's bladder tied to a reed. You try not to think too hard about how many people that device has treated today. Fun fact: some medieval hospitals had entire wards dedicated to these treatments, where patients lined up for their daily dose of agony. It was all about maintenance, like a sick medieval oil change. And while all this is happening, the leeches wait patiently. Yes, leeches. Kept in jars, often starved to make them extra hungry. They're applied to your skin with the same reverence a modern nurse might give a flu shot. You squirm as Brother Matthew places them on your arms, your chest, even your face. They latch on instantly, wriggling as they feast on your blood. Historians still argue whether leech therapy had any actual medical benefit beyond the placebo effect. Some scholars claim it reduced swelling in certain conditions, while others dismiss it as little more than medieval snake oil. But for now, you don't have the luxury to debate it. You lie there, bleeding from a dozen tiny mouths, trying to remember what it felt like to be clean, safe, and not a walking experiment. And while all this is happening, you notice the monks whispering among themselves. They're worried about the plague. Rumors are swirling that it's creeping closer to town, which means things are about to get even worse. Hard to imagine, right? But don't worry. You'll get a front row seat. For now, you drift in and out of consciousness. Your body, light, weak, and clammy from all the fluids they've forced out of you. Thomas grins weakly from his spot. They say if the bleeding doesn't work, they'll try trepanning next. You raise an eyebrow. Trepanning. Yeah, he laughs. They drill a hole in your skull to let the demons out. You stare at him, waiting for the punchline. There isn't one. In some places, they really did believe that. Though not all hospitals practiced it. The idea that illnesses, especially mental ones, were caused by evil spirits was widespread. Drilling into a patient's head to release them. A terrifyingly real procedure. You shake your head, regretting it immediately as the room spins. Remember, in the Middle Ages, the lines between medicine, superstition, and religion were as blurred as the bottom of that murky wine cup. Sometimes they treated you like a patient, sometimes like a sinner, and sometimes like an experiment. And as your leeches finish their feast, and the monks prep for the next round of purging, you realize something awful. You're starting to feel numb. Maybe that's the point. The numbness is deceptive. It's not relief. It's resignation. You're slipping into the routine now, like everyone else in this grim theater of suffering. Treatments blur into each other. The bleeding the purging, the chanting. It becomes your new normal. But as you lay on your lice-infested mat, you start to notice another ever-present companion in the medieval hospital, the rats. At first, they're shadows in the corners, darting between beds, sniffing at bowls of untouched gruel. But the longer you stay, the bolder they become. They nibble at crumbs by your head. They scuttle over your legs while you sleep, or try to. And it's not just the rats. Fleas, lice, and flies form a buzzing, biting cloud over every patient. You swat at them, but they always return relentless in their hunger. It's like you're the main course in an endless banquet for vermin. Thomas tries to make light of it. If the fever doesn't get you, the fleas will. He scratches at his scalp, revealing patches of red and inflamed skin. Bet they're cleaner than we are. He might have a point. Hospitals in the Middle Ages weren't the clean antiseptic spaces we think of today. They were filthy, overcrowded, and crawling with pests. Straw bedding wasn't changed. Why bother when the patients themselves were never washed? Some historians suggest that in certain hospitals, the floors were never even scrubbed, just layered with fresh straw over the muck. And the pests. They weren't just an annoyance. They were carriers of disease. Remember the Black Death, the one that wiped out half of Europe. You can thank these little guys and their flea passengers for that. Historians still debate whether medieval hospitals were aware of this connection. Some suggest they believed the rats were merely a nuisance, not a health risk. Others argue that monks and staff turned a blind eye, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the suffering. But the rats aren't the worst part, because in some dark corners of the hospital, you overhear whispers, strange cures, odd rituals. You hear about treatments involving roasted cats, ground up toads, and even crocodile dung. Yes, crocodile dung. Apparently, in some fringe medical texts, it's suggested as a cure for infections when mixed into a poultice. Whether anyone in this hospital actually uses it, you'd rather not find out. You might laugh if your mouth wasn't so dry and your lips cracked from dehydration. The monks believe in balancing humors, but they don't seem to believe in giving patients enough water. Maybe they fear too much liquid will tip your balance toward excess phlegm. Or maybe they're just stretched too thin to care. The only thing they're generous with is wine, or what they call wine. The watered-down bitter brew is handed out during mass prayers, offered as both nourishment and sacrament. It tastes like despair. And while you're sipping this bitter offering, you notice the relic. Every hospital has one. Some sacred object, usually a splinter of wood. allegedly from the true cross, or a bone from a saint's pinky toe. Patients pray to it, monks parade it through the halls, and everyone whispers that its touch can heal. Historians still argue whether these relics were genuine articles of faith or clever fundraising scams by the church to lure in wealthy donors. But when you're staring death in the face, you don't care about scholarly debates. You clasp your hands, mumble a prayer, and hope the splinter of wood dangling from the ceiling really does carry a shred of divine mercy. You're not alone in your desperation. The hospital has a priest on permanent duty, and his main job isn't to heal the body, it's to prepare the soul. He walks from bed to bed, offering last rites like it's a daily chore. And it is, in the medieval worldview. Death wasn't the enemy. It was the inevitable outcome. The hospital's real function, some argue, wasn't to cure you, but to make sure you died with your spiritual debts paid. You glance over at the woman in the next bed. She's clutching a rosary, eyes closed, murmuring prayers between coughing fits. You don't know her name. No one bothers with introductions here. Everyone's just another body waiting for the priest's visit. And if your illness is of the mind, well, that's a whole other horror. You've heard the stories. Patients with what we'd now call mental illness, locked away in tiny cells, shackled to walls, left to scream their madness into the void. Sometimes they get an exorcism. Sometimes they just disappear. Thomas whispers of a patient last week who started babbling nonsense about visions. They dragged him to the basement, and no one's seen him since. Demon possession, the monks say, but you wonder if it's just another case of fever hallucination or despair. The line between medicine and superstition is razor thin here, and sometimes even the monks get caught in the web of fear. You overhear them muttering about bad omens, curses, and the devil's breath on the town's wind. It's enough to make you want to curl deeper into your straw pile and pretend you're somewhere else. But you can't escape the sounds, the smells, the constant itch of fleas burrowing into your skin. This place isn't just a hospital. It's a living nightmare. A place where hope comes in the form of prayers to bone fragments, and the only prescription is more leeches. You lie awake, heart pounding, as the shadows creep closer. You swear you see eyes glowing in the dark. Maybe rats. Maybe something worse. And you wonder, not for the first time, if you'll make it to see tomorrow's gruel. Morning in the hospital isn't so much a new beginning as it is a grim continuation. The sun might rise, but the air inside the stone walls remains heavy, sour, unmoving. You're still here. So is the fever. And now, It's not just your body that feels cracked and brittle, your mind does too. But today brings a new spectacle. You notice a group of monks herding the more able-bodied patients toward the chapel. It's time for the balancing of the humors. Yes, again. You're barely able to sit upright, but Thomas nudges you. "Come on," he wheezes. "If you don't join the group, they'll think you're possessed." Not exactly motivational, but effective. So you shuffle along the scent of mildew and damp straw, clinging to your tattered clothes. You reach the small candle-lit chamber where patients gather, many too weak to sit. Some are already lying on the cold stone, pale and limp as corpses. But everyone knows the drill. It's time to balance. You overhear Brother Matthew explaining the day's schedule of treatments as if he's announcing the lunch menu. Bleeding, purging. And for those feeling extra spiritual, today fasting. Because, of course, eating too much might imbalance your humors. Can't have that. You know the routine by now. But today, you catch a glimpse of something new. Something even more unsettling. Brother Matthew holds aloft a mysterious bag of herbs, gesturing to the gathered patients with theatrical flair. Special tonic imported from the East, he says. Guaranteed to expel evil spirits and cleanse the body. Historians still debate whether such exotic remedies were genuine imports or clever fakes created by enterprising merchants looking to capitalize on the ignorance of the sick. Cinnamon, nutmeg, and saffron were sometimes sold as cure-alls, though most patients would never know the difference. You watch as the tonic is doled out in chipped wooden cups. It smells like vinegar, mixed with rotting fruit. You force it down, gagging on the bitterness. Thomas coughs and whispers, "Pretty sure that's just wine and boiled socks." You can't help but smirk. Humor is the only medicine that still works around here. But even the jokes fade when you realize the monks aren't just treating bodies. Today, they're tending to souls. One of the patients, a gaunt woman with matted hair, has been singled out. She's been speaking in tongues, they say, claiming visions of angels and demons. In modern terms, you might think of epilepsy or schizophrenia. But here, it's demonic possession. She's dragged before the altar, hands bound. The other patients watch, some curious, some horrified. The priest begins chanting, sprinkling holy water that dribbles down her face, mixing with tears or maybe sweat. It's hard to tell. The ritual is crude, brutal. She screams, convulses, and the monks only chant louder. They press a cross to her lips, demanding she renounce the devil. You shift uncomfortably, knowing there's no way this ends well. Historians still argue whether these exorcisms were acts of mercy, fear, or sadism. Some believed they genuinely saved souls. Others see them as a cruel response to misunderstood illnesses. Either way, the woman is dragged away afterward. No one speaks of her again. The mood in the hospital grows darker. The patients whisper among themselves, casting suspicious glances at anyone who mumbles in their sleep or cries out in pain. Fear turns the sick against each other, as if they might catch madness like a fever. And you clutch your blanket tighter, praying you don't start speaking nonsense in your sleep. Because here, that's all it takes to end up chained in the cellar. You try to focus on anything else, like the hospital's strange collection of relics. In the corner of the chapel is a gilded box said to contain the hair of Saint Margaret, the patron saint of childbirth. Patients touch it reverently, desperate for a blessing, a miracle, a sliver of hope. Thomas shakes his head. If that's Saint Margaret's hair, I'm the King of France. But you touch it anyway. Because in this place, skepticism is a luxury you can't afford. You overhear Brother Matthew boasting to a visitor about the relic's healing powers. Apparently last month, a woman with a festering leg touched it, and her wound miraculously closed. Of course, no one saw it happen. And the woman, she died 3 days later. Funny how that works. But the monks need these stories. They feed the hospital's reputation, and they help loosen the purse strings of wealthy donors who'd rather buy a little divine insurance than actually set foot in this house of horrors. Historians still argue whether these relic-centered narratives were genuinely believed by the monks, or if they were carefully cultivated tales of hope in an otherwise hopeless world. You suspect the answer is both. And while the rich might fund the hospital's relic collection, they don't stay here. Oh no. They have their own private healers, their own clean beds. This place, it's for the poor, the desperate, the forgotten. You feel it in your bones, the way the staff glance at you, the way they stop pretending once the priest leaves the room. You're not a patient to them. You're a body waiting for last rites. And yet, you're still here, still breathing, still fighting. Because no matter how grim things get, there's a stubborn ember inside you that refuses to go out. Maybe it's foolishness. Maybe it's survival instinct. Maybe it's that tiny, flickering hope that somehow, against all odds, you'll make it out of this alive. But you know better than to say that aloud. In this place, hope is as dangerous as disease. You lie back on your mat, weak, feverish, but still clinging to that stubborn ember of life. The flickering candlelight above casts strange shadows on the stone ceiling, dancing like ghosts over the heads of the moaning, writhing patients around you. You close your eyes, hoping for rest. But tonight, the hospital has other plans. The air is heavy with something new. Fear. It's not the usual dread of sickness or the inevitable visit from Brother Matthew. This is different. You hear whispers of a new illness, something worse than anything the hospital's seen before. They say it's already in the town. They say it's spreading. You try to ignore it, but you can't. The Black Death has arrived, and suddenly, the hospital that was already bursting at the seams becomes a human floodplain. People pour in from the streets, desperate for help, clutching children, dragging their sick relatives behind them. But there's no room left. Patients spill into the hallways, the chapel, the courtyards. Anywhere there's space, or not. You can barely sit up, but the sight is impossible to ignore. Faces blackened with swollen buboes, bodies shaking with fever, men and women coughing up blood. The monks scramble to accommodate them, setting up makeshift beds, piling people atop one another like cordwood. Thomas turns to you, eyes hollow. We're all dead men now. He's probably right. Historians still debate the true death toll of the Black Death, but estimates range from 30% to over 50% of Europe's population. And hospitals, already cesspools of disease, became epicenters of infection. The monks do their best, or what they think is best. They sprinkle holy water over the crowds. They chant prayers louder. They bring out every relic, every charm, every drop of wine mixed with bitter herbs. But it's like throwing pebbles at a tidal wave. And amidst the chaos, the rats. Oh, the rats are having a feast. They scuttle openly through the hospital, now bold and fat, gorging themselves on scraps crawling over the sick and the dead alike. You spot one dragging something that used to be part of a hand. Even the monks can't pretend anymore. Fear grips them too. They know their prayers can't stop the plague. Some whisper about fleeing, about abandoning the hospital altogether. But most stay, out of duty or fear of damnation. Hard to say. Historians still argue whether the monks' actions during the plague were acts of bravery or futility. Some records praise their devotion. Others condemn them for spreading more death through their rituals and relic processions. You don't have the luxury to debate it. You're too busy trying not to suffocate in the crush of bodies now pressing into your space, coughing, bleeding, dying. And the truth treatments. They escalate in desperation. Brother Matthew moves through the aisles with a grim face, applying poultices of herbs and vinegar to the buboes, lancing them when they burst. It doesn't help. If anything, it spreads the infection faster. Some patients are bled until they're little more than husks. Others are forced to drink concoctions of mercury and arsenic in the hopeless belief that poison might drive out poison. You can't help but think of the irony they're killing patients in the name of saving them. And yet, some cling to hope in the strangest ways. You see a woman press a live chicken to her sores, believing the bird will absorb the illness. It's a common belief, one of many desperate superstitions embraced in the face of the plague. Historians still shake their heads at these practices, but for people like you, they're the only tools left. The hospital's atmosphere shifts from misery to hysteria. Patients turn on each other, accusing one another of witchcraft, of cursing the hospital, of bringing the plague inside. Some whisper that it's the work of the Jews or heretics or sinners. The need to blame someone, anyone, is overwhelming. And the monks, they feed the fire. They hold special masses demanding confessions, repentance, flagellations. Patients are encouraged to beat themselves, to show God their sorrow, to beg for mercy. You watch in horror as men and women, barely able to stand, whip themselves bloody in the hospital courtyard. Thomas shakes his head. They think pain will save them. Fools. But are they? You wonder if they're any more foolish than you, lying here waiting for a cure that doesn't exist. You try to stand, but your leg won't support you. The fever is back, hotter than ever, making your vision blur and your thoughts drift into strange, half-mad tangents. You see visions of saints, of dancing skeletons, of rats wearing monks' robes. You hear laughter where there is none, feel hands brushing your skin where no one stands. Maybe you're slipping like the others. Maybe the sickness has reached your mind at last. Or maybe this place has always been a kind of hell, and you've only now realized it. You clutch your blanket tighter, listening to the cries around you, the rasp of saws, the bubbling gurgle of the dying. And amidst it all, the rats feast. This is the medieval hospital during the Black Death, and you are just another shadow in the crowd. Night falls again, though in this place it's hard to tell the difference. The air inside the hospital feels heavier now, like it's thick with invisible poison. You breathe shallowly, your mouth dry, your lips cracked and bleeding. The plague has turned the already suffocating space into something beyond hellish, a grotesque carnival of suffering where even the monks have lost their grip on order. The dead pile up faster than they can be carried away. Some lie in beds for days before someone notices they've stopped breathing. Others die on the floor, trampled by those still desperate enough to claw for space on a rotting mattress. But the hospital, it keeps its doors open. Hospitals in the Middle Ages weren't just places of treatment. They were repositories of the dying, and in times of plague, they doubled as morgues. When there were too many bodies, they simply piled them in corners, waiting for carts to haul them to mass graves. You see it now. The cart creaks past your bed, the smell hitting you like a brick wall. Sweet, sickly, unforgettable. You turn your face away, gagging, but there's no escape. The scent is everywhere. It clings to the walls, to your clothes, to your skin. Thomas doesn't speak much anymore. He lies still, his breathing shallow. His skin has taken on a waxy sheen, and you suspect he's given up. Can you blame him? You hear someone sobbing in the next bed. A young woman, her face streaked with filth and tears cradling a child who stopped moving hours ago. No one comes to take him. She rocks him, humming a lullaby into the stench-filled night. The monks have mostly retreated to the chapel, now leaving the patients to fend for themselves. You glimpse them through the cracked door, chanting endlessly, their voices hoarse, as if sheer volume might drown out the screams outside. Historians still argue whether the monks' abandonment of their patients was cowardice or a desperate act of self-preservation. Some records suggest they believed the plague was divine punishment, and that only prayer, not medicine, could save them. But in the wards, prayer feels hollow. It echoes off the stone walls and returns as silence. You struggle to sit up, needing air, but the only breeze comes from the gaping windows, bringing in the stink of the street, where the plague carts rattle by, bells tolling to warn the living. In the corner, a group of patients huddle together, clutching candles, whispering prayers, not sanctioned by the church. They speak of witches, of old gods, of desperate bargains. In the chaos, superstition blossoms like mold. You've heard the rumors that witches curse the hospitals, that the plague is the devil's breath, that only dark magic can stop it. And in the women's ward, things are worse. You manage to hobble to the edge of the hall, peering into the cramped space designated for women. It's smaller, darker, filled with the same stench, but tinged with something sharper: fear. The women here face an extra burden. Along with sickness, they're burdened with suspicion. The monks eye them warily, blaming their suffering on sin, on witchcraft, on female weakness. You hear whispered threats of trials, of purifications, of exorcisms. Historians still argue whether these accusations were genuine fears or a way to enforce patriarchal control during crises. But for the women in these wards, it hardly matters. The result is the same punishment layered atop sickness. You see it unfold before you. A young woman, barely more than a girl, is dragged from her bed, accused of bewitching the patients. They say her prayers are unnatural, her fever, dreams laced with devilish symbols. She's thrown into a cell alone, where she'll likely die unseen, unheard. Thomas coughs weakly beside you. "They'll come for us next," he murmurs. You want to tell him he's being paranoid. But in this place, paranoia is survival. The hospitals have become theaters of accusation, of fear, feeding fear. Patients are blamed for each other's deaths. The sick accuse the monks of withholding cures. The monks accuse the patients of harboring sin. The air crackles with hysteria. And the rats, they're the only ones thriving. You see them in the rafters, in the beds, on the carts of the dead. Bold, fat, fearless. You lie back, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling, trying not to think about what's crawling just out of sight. But sleep won't come. The moans, the sobs, the screams, they never stop. Even the walls seem to tremble under the weight of it all. You wonder how much longer you can endure this. How much longer you can hold on to that flicker of life. But deep down, you already know. This place isn't meant for survival. It's a waiting room for death. And you are still waiting. The silence is different now. It's not the usual restless hush of fevered patients moaning in their sleep, or the distant scrape of the monks' sandals on the stone floor. This is something heavier. A suffocating, thick, unnatural quiet. You sit up, or try to. Your body protests every joint, screaming, like it's been rusted shut. The once bustling ward is empty. At least it looks empty. Most of the patients are gone. The monks, too. The plague has done its work. Those still alive lie motionless, hollow-eyed, more ghost than human. You wonder if you're among them, if you've crossed some invisible line between the living and the half-dead. But even in the stillness, the horror lingers. You watch as one of the last monks, his face gaunt and streaked with grime, moves quietly through the ward. He stops by each bed, muttering last rites under his breath, sprinkling holy water over bodies that haven't moved in days. When he reaches you, he pauses. His lips form the words automatically, as if he expects you to already be gone. But your eyes meet his. For a brief moment, there's something like surprise. Still breathing, he mumbles, almost to himself, "God's will or the devil's." He moves on. It's a grim reminder that here in these halls, survival is beginning to look like an accident, maybe even a curse. You drag yourself out of your straw nest, leaning on the cold stone wall for balance. Your leg stump throbs a dull, constant ache that's almost comforting now. A reminder you're still tethered to this miserable world. Outside the ward, the scene is worse. The hospital corridors, once crammed with bodies, are eerily abandoned. You see hastily abandoned tools, bloodied cloth, overturned buckets. Flies swarm over forgotten bowls of gruel. Rats patrol openly, now fat and fearless, as if they've inherited the place. The chapel doors stand ajar. Inside, a few monks kneel before the altar, chanting feverishly. Their voices crack, echoing in the vast emptiness. Thomas is gone. You don't know when. You don't know where. You almost don't care anymore. The few patients left shuffle like ghosts hollowed out by sickness and fear. No one speaks. Words feel pointless now. You make your way outside your body, screaming in protest, needing air, any air that isn't thick with death. And outside isn't much better. The hospital courtyard is a charnel house. Bodies lie in heaps, flies buzzing in thick black clouds over the bloated corpses. The plague pits overflow. The grave diggers are gone, fled or dead, and the townsfolk have stopped coming near. But you see them in the distance, watching, always watching. They stand at the edge of the square, clutching their children, their rosaries, their superstition. They hurl insults at the hospital walls, blaming the monks, blaming the patients, blaming anyone but themselves. You hear the words whispered on the wind. Witches, heretics, cursed. They say the hospital is cursed now. They might be right. You turn back toward the looming stone structure. Once it was a place of sanctuary, of charity, of hope. Now, it's little more than a tomb. Historians still argue whether these hospitals served as havens during the Black Death, or if they became death traps spreading the plague more efficiently than any battlefield. But to you, there's no debate. This place is a mausoleum dressed in the trappings of mercy. You find a bench, rotting, splintered, forgotten. You collapse onto it, head in your hands, trying to remember who you were before you entered this place. But the memories are slipping. The hospital has hollowed you out, scraped away your identity, your past, your future. You're just another shadow now. And yet, there's a strange clarity in the emptiness. You look around and realize something. There are no more treatments, no more leeches, no more bleeding, purging, chanting, or relics. There's only you and the quiet. For the first time, you notice how loud the world outside the hospital really is. The cawing of crows, the rustle of the breeze through broken shutters, the distant toll of the death bell. You wonder if maybe the worst horror of all isn't the sickness, the suffering, or even the death. It's the indifference, the way the hospital swallows people whole, and the world outside barely notices. You hear the townsfolk gossiping now, bold enough to creep closer to the gates. They say the hospital will be burned, purified by fire, that it's the only way to cleanse the corruption festering within. You don't know if it's true, but somehow it doesn't scare you. Maybe the fire would be a mercy. You lie back, staring up at the gray sky, wondering what kind of person survives all this, if anyone does. You close your eyes, and for once, the hospital is silent. You open your eyes to the sound of hammering. For a moment, your plague-addled mind imagines carpenters repairing the hospital, restoring it to some semblance of order. But no, it's not repairs. It's the townsfolk boarding up the doors. You drag yourself to the threshold, watching them from the shadows of the crumbling entrance. Their faces are twisted with fear, suspicion, and something more dangerous. Righteousness. They're sealing the hospital, locking it from the outside. You can hear them now, shouting prayers, hurling curses at the building, at you, at the shadows within. They've decided that no one gets out. The hospital is cursed, the plague is punishment, and those inside are no longer human. You're a vessel of sin, a threat to their fragile world. Historians still argue whether these drastic measures were ordered by church officials, local leaders, or simply panicked mobs acting on rumor and desperation. Regardless, the results were the same: quarantine by force. You watch as the boards are nailed into place, sealing the heavy oak doors shut, trapping you inside with the few gasping survivors, the bodies, the rats. Thomas had been right all along. No one leaves. You sink to the cold floor, back pressed against the wall, breath ragged. You feel a strange numbness washing over you. Not fear, not even anger. Just a quiet, hollow acceptance. But as the hours stretch on, something shifts inside you. You notice the others stirring. The few remaining patients, now fully aware of their fate. Desperation breeds strange alliances. You hear whispers, plans to break the boards, to escape through the tunnels beneath the hospital. Yes, tunnels. The old hospitals were often built over catacombs, ancient sewage systems, or crypts. A labyrinth beneath the stone floors. Some say they connect to the nearby monastery. Others say they lead straight to hell. Historians still debate whether these tunnels were real escape routes or just the fever dreams of desperate patients. But right now, they're your only chance. You crawl after the others, your body a ruin of pain and exhaustion as they pry open a rusted grate beneath the chapel. The smell that wafts up is worse than anything you've encountered so far, a potent mix of rot, mold, and things best left unidentified. But the alternative is staying, waiting to starve, or waiting for the flames should the townsfolk make good on their threats. You drop into the darkness. The tunnels are worse than you imagined. Narrow, damp, claustrophobic. The air is thick, choking alive with unseen, crawling things. Your hand brushes something soft, furry. You don't check what it is. You hear the others ahead, scurrying shadows, muffled cries, desperate breaths. You shuffle forward, dragging yourself through the filth, trying not to think about the bones you crawl over. Some are old, some are not. The tunnels twist coil-led nowhere and everywhere. You lose track of time. Once you think you see light, hope flickering at the end of a narrow passage. But when you reach it, it's just a broken lantern left behind by someone who didn't make it. You wonder if you will. You press on, driven by something primal, something beyond survival instinct. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's spite. Maybe it's the part of you that refuses to die in the dark, forgotten. Your thoughts drift to the monks, the townsfolk, the tourists who treated your suffering as a spectacle. You wonder if they're sleeping comfortably tonight, thinking they've solved the problem by locking you away. You promise yourself, if you make it out, you'll remind them that the sickness they fear isn't just in your body. It's in them, too. You hear screams ahead. Someone took a wrong turn, found something worse than rats. You close your ears, crawl faster. At last, you see it. A faint crack of moonlight bleeding through a crumbling stone wall. You claw at it, fingernails scraping raw. The wall gives way, collapsing outward into the night air. You spill out into the cold, muddy fields beyond the town walls. Free. You gasp, sucking in the clean night air. It smells like damp, earth manure life. You made it. But as you lie in the mud, staring up at the stars, you realize you don't know where to go. You can't return to the town. They'll see you as a monster. You can't return to the hospital. It's sealed, cursed dead. You're a ghost now, a walking reminder of everything they fear. And maybe that's power. You sit up, wiping the muck from your face, laughing bitterly. You survived the medieval hospital, but at what cost? You're no longer the person who entered those doors. You're something else. And as you stumble toward the distant woods, toward an uncertain future, you whisper to yourself, you probably wouldn't survive this. But you did. Barely. The world outside feels eerily distant, like you've stumbled into another reality. The stars overhead twinkle coldly, indifferent to the horrors you've just crawled out of. The distant lights of the town glow like mocking candles, flickering behind the safety of walls you are no longer welcome within. Your body aches, your wounds ooze, and yet there's an odd lightness in your steps as you stagger through the fields, past rotting crops and abandoned carts. You are an escapee, an outcast, a relic of the hospital's forgotten halls. You laugh bitterly at the thought. You were supposed to be a patient. Instead, you've become a survivor of a place that never intended anyone to leave. Historians still debate whether medieval hospitals were ever meant to heal at all, or if they were elaborate death rites disguised in stained glass and charity. Walking through the cold mud, you feel the answer in your bones. Healing was never the point. Control was. Control the sick. Control the suffering. Keep them out of sight, confined to their wards, their roles, their quiet deaths. But you broke the script. You think of the others still inside, the ones who didn't escape the tunnels, who didn't claw their way through the suffocating dark. You think of Thomas, of the nameless woman clutching her dead child, of the monks still kneeling at empty altars. The plague didn't kill them. The system did. You limp along the cart tracks, following the faint trail of hoofprints leading away from the town. Maybe there's another village beyond the ridge. Maybe another hospital, another cycle of misery. But part of you knows better. You spot a farmhouse in the distance, candlelight flickering through a single window. You consider approaching, begging for food, water, shelter. But then you hear the whispers. They say the hospital ghosts wander the fields at night. They say the ones who escape aren't really alive anymore. You smile grimly. You're a legend now, a story parents tell their children to make them stay inside after dark. You can work with that. You shamble onward, unseen, a phantom on the edge of the world. And even out here, the rituals of superstition cling like leeches. Every door is marked with protective symbols, crude crosses, sprigs of garlic, bowls of salt. Villagers clutch relics, muttering prayers against the wandering dead against you. Historians still debate whether these superstitions served as a fragile comfort or simply deepened the terror of the unknown. To you, they're both. You stumble upon a caravan of pilgrims camped by the roadside. They huddle by their fireheads, bowed in prayer, clutching fragments of saints' bones, scraps of cloth said to have touched holy martyrs. You watch from the shadows as they weep, plead, beg the heavens for protection. You wonder if they'd recognize you as one of the damned. You wonder if they'd offer you food or throw stones. Best not to find out. Instead, you linger on the edge, a ghost haunting the edges of their flickering firelight, listening to their whispered stories. They speak of other hospitals, other cursed towns, other horrors. Everywhere you go, the same patterns emerge: sickness, superstition, suffering scapegoats. It's almost comforting in its predictability. You lie in the tall grass that night, wrapped in your ragged blanket, your fevered body trembling beneath the stars. You realize something the monks never told you, something you had to bleed to learn. The real sickness isn't just in the body. It's in the fear. Fear of death. Fear of the unknown. Fear of each other. It spreads faster than any plague infects every town, every mind, every prayer. You wonder if anyone will ever find a cure for that. But you're too tired to care. You drift into a restless sleep, haunted by dreams of dark tunnels, chanting monks, and rats the size of dogs wearing crowns made of bone. When you wake, the dawn is creeping over the fields, pale and cold. You're still alive. For now. And that's enough. You rise, bones creaking, and head toward the horizon. There's no destination, no plan, just the stubborn instinct to keep moving, to keep breathing, to keep defying the narrative they wrote for you. Maybe you'll find a town that won't chase you off. Maybe you'll become the story they tell about the cursed survivor of the plague hospital. Maybe you'll disappear into the woods and never speak to another soul again. All of those fates feel the same now. Because once you've walked the corridors of that place, you never really leave. You carry it with you in your dreams, in your nightmares, in the way your skin crawls when you hear the sound of chanting. You survived the horror house, and in doing so, maybe you became part of it. The road narrows, and the world grows quiet again. Trees press in close now, tall and watchful, as if nature itself is deciding whether to let you pass. The wind whispers through the leaves in a language you almost understand, like the murmurs of dying monks or the breathless confessions of those who thought prayer could heal the plague. You've traveled for days, or maybe weeks. Time has lost its grip on you. The stars remain your only guide, and your body a stitched together relic of your former self moves mostly on instinct now. You're not entirely alone. Every now and then, you pass other travelers, ragged shapes on lonely roads. They rarely speak. A nod, a glance, sometimes a long, suspicious stare. They, too, carry the smell of hospitals, the weight of sleepless nights, the invisible tattoo of survival. Some cough quietly into their sleeves and walk faster when they see you. Others simply cross to the other side of the road, clutching relics tightly to their chest, as if proximity alone might invite their own undoing. You don't blame them. You probably wouldn't survive yourself. You find shelter one night in an old, crumbling chapel at the forest's edge. The stained glass windows are shattered, the altar defaced, but the roof mostly holds. You light a fire from broken pews and sit in the flickering warmth, bones, aching stomach snarling. It's here that your memories begin to rearrange themselves, not in order, not clearly, but in flashes. The sound of Thomas laughing between coughs, the sickly glow of candlelight over a dying child's face, the wet, sucking sound of leeches being plucked from your skin, the image of the priest, his hands trembling as he gave last rite to an entire row of corpses without once blinking. And you remember the woman chained in the cellar, the one accused of madness, of demons. You remember how her eyes met yours, and in them you saw not hysteria, but clarity. She was the only one who understood. The hospital was never built for healing. It was a theater of pain, constructed atop fear, sealed with ritual. And beneath the prayers and relics and chanting, there was nothing. No mercy, no cure, only the silence that follows when all hope has been bled out. Historians still debate whether hospitals evolved from monasteries as centers of care or control, whether they were acts of Christian compassion or thinly veiled quarantine camps. Some even argue that early hospitals were designed more for spiritual purification than medical treatment. You think about that a lot, especially now as you rest in the ruins of a chapel where no priest remains, where no prayers are answered. You stare up at the rafters and wonder what it would be like to rebuild not the building, but the idea. A place that actually heals. A place that offers comfort without punishment. But it's a dangerous thought, because in this world, change is seen as rebellion, and rebellion as heresy. You've seen what happens to those who question the rituals. You wear the scars from when you tried. You drift off to sleep beside your fire, dreaming not of rats or blood or groaning halls, but of silence. Blessed silence. The next morning, you wake to the sound of voices. A caravan of pilgrims has arrived, dusty and exhausted, seeking shelter in the chapel ruins. They eye you cautiously, unsure if you're friend, stranger, or plague spirit. You offer no answers. One woman, a healer, judging by the pouch of herbs at her waist, crouches beside you. She checks your fevered brow, your infected leg, stump, your gaunt cheeks. God preserved you, she whispers, almost to herself. You don't correct her. Let her believe it. The pilgrims share bread, weak ale, and herbs that taste of mint, and something bitter you can't name. You eat slowly, body half expecting it all to vanish. They don't ask where you've come from. But one man older, with the face of someone who's buried more friends than he can count, watches you carefully. Later that evening, he sits beside your fire. You're from one of the closed places, aren't you? He asks. You nod. He doesn't flinch. There's others. Across the hills, old hospitals, abandoned, forgotten. He pauses, staring into the flames. Some say the people who escape them bring something with them. A darkness, a sickness of the soul. You meet his gaze. Do I seem sick to you? He smiles faintly. You seem awake. You don't sleep much that night. Instead, you listen to the forest, to the crackle of the fire, to the distant howls that could be wolves or something else entirely. You know now that your journey isn't over, because what you survived should never happen again. You won't go back, but you might go forward. And that in itself is a kind of defiance. The days stretch on your steps, growing steadier, your mind less clouded. You're still haunted. Of course you are. But there's something else now. Something that surprises you. Clarity. Each village you pass, each crumbling church, each frightened face reminds you of the place you escaped. And it fills you with something you haven't felt in months. Purpose. The road winds through hamlets where plague rumors hang thicker than the smoke from their chimneys. Everywhere, the same pattern repeats. The sick are hidden away. The healthy barricade their doors. The churches hold frantic masses. And in every town square, the same grim relics paraded out under the sun, as if wood and bone can stop the invisible. You sit at the edges of these gatherings, now watching, listening, learning. Historians still argue whether this was the period when medicine began to stir from its long slumber, when whispers of reform rose from the ashes of superstition. Some trace it to the desperate failures of hospitals like the one you left behind. The world couldn't pretend anymore that prayers alone could stop death. But you see the truth more plainly than any scholar. The old ways are dying. Slowly, violently, but dying nonetheless. You meet others like you along the road, survivors, outcasts, former patients, wandering monks stripped of their faith. They swap stories around fires, compare scars, laugh at things only those who've lived through horror can laugh at. One woman tells you of a distant land where doctors wear strange bird-like masks filled with herbs to protect themselves from the plague. You wonder if it works, or if it's just another ritual in a world drowning in them. You share your story too. At first, they flinch, recoil, treat you like a walking corpse. But slowly, they begin to listen. You become something between a legend and a cautionary tale. The one who crawled from the horror house. The one who saw the belly of the beast and lived to tell of it. You feel the weight of their stares. Some see you as cursed, some as lucky, some as dangerous. And maybe you are. You reach the city at last. Its gates stand open, but the guards eye you warily, their faces wrapped in cloth, their spears crossed against the tide of refugees. They only let you in because you don't look sick anymore, at least not on the outside. Inside, the streets teem with merchants hawking plague cures, relic sellers peddling promises, and quack doctors bleeding the desperate in alleys. The hospital here is no different, grand on the outside, rotting on the inside. You don't enter. You've learned your lesson. Instead, you find the whispers, the underground, the few brave souls daring to speak against the old ways. Herbalists, apothecaries, scholars smuggling in forbidden texts from the East. You sit among them in candle-lit rooms, sharing what you know, what you lived. They listen. They take note. They ask questions the monks never dared to. You realize now you're not just a patient anymore. You're part of something new, a slow, fragile shift toward something better, toward a world where people like you might not have to suffer in filthy wards surrounded by rats and relics and empty prayers. Historians still argue when the first sparks of medical reform truly caught fire. Was it the Renaissance? the enlightenment. You know it started long before. It started in whispers, in stories told by survivors, in the haunted eyes of those who endured the horror houses and refused to let them continue. You sleep in a real bed that night, a miracle in itself. Clean sheets, a roof over your head, a meal that doesn't taste like defeat. You almost don't trust it. But as you drift off, you allow yourself a rare luxury hope. You dream not of rats or saws or the cold stone walls of the hospital. You dream of light. And for the first time, the darkness feels like it's retreating. And now, as we let the embers of this journey dim, take a deep breath. Let the weight of those grim, flickering wards fade into the distance. You've walked a hard road tonight, through crowded hospital halls, whispered prayers in dark chapels, and fields where the sick and forgotten became legends. But now, the candles are low. The fever has broken. The stories, for now, are tucked into their dusty corners. Let your body soften into the comfort of your bed, your blankets gathered close, the hum of the night outside your window. A gentle reminder that you're far from those stone corridors and chanting monks. You're safe, safe to drift, safe to let your mind wander into softer stories, quieter worlds, where the only sounds are the rustling of leaves or the slow lap of water on a quiet shore. Whatever ghosts linger from tonight's tale, let them settle now. Let them rest. And if you feel the edges of that old world reaching for you again, remember, you survived it. You always do. Let the cool night air lull you into sleep. Let your breath slow. Let your body grow heavy and still. You've walked far enough for tonight. Sleep well, friend.